porcupine.
The stage lights are blinding. A packed theater waits for the man in the oversized suit to say something funny. Somewhere beyond the curtain, glasses clink, strangers whisper, and a comedian's name is announced with more excitement than he feels inside. Steve Harvey steps toward the microphone. The audience sees confidence. A polished suit, a thick mustache, a man who looks as though he belongs beneath the spotlight. What they cannot see is the car parked outside. Inside that car are nearly all his
I do all the cooking outside. Let's make no mistake about that.
possessions. A few clothes, personal papers, a blanket, one carefully protected suit for performances. There is no apartment waiting for him after the show. No warm bedroom. No refrigerator. No safe place where he can close the door and finally stop pretending everything is fine. When the laughter ends, Steve may return to that car,
When our 2-month-old granddaughter Rose showed up.
lower the seat, and try to sleep. This is where his dream has taken him. Not to Hollywood, not to television, not even to a cheap motel, to a parking lot. And although millions would later know him as the energetic host of Family Feud, the author giving relationship advice, the radio personality delivering encouragement, and the entertainer laughing through almost any disaster, there was a period when Steve Harvey was not trying to build an empire. He was trying to survive the night. But the most painful part of his story was not simply that he became homeless. It was that every empty room, unpaid bill, failed opportunity, and humiliating rejection seemed to repeat a warning he had heard when he was still a child. Be realistic. Steve Harvey was born Broderick Stephen Harvey in 1957 in Welch, West Virginia. Before his family eventually settled in Cleveland, Ohio, his father worked hard as a coal miner, and his mother was a teacher. Their home was built around discipline, responsibility, faith, and the expectation that a person
Something a burglar would not want to see when he breaks into a house.
earned everything through effort. Steve was not born into an entertainment dynasty. There were no powerful agents visiting the family home, no television executives waiting to discover him. He was a working-class boy with a noticeable stutter and an ambition that sounded almost impossible in the world around him. One day at school, his teacher asked the students to write down what they wanted to become. Steve wrote that he wanted to be on television. To him, the answer was natural. He could already imagine it. A camera, a stage, a voice reaching people far beyond Cleveland. But instead of encouraging him, the teacher reportedly questioned the dream. Steve could barely speak smoothly in front of a classroom. How could a boy who struggled to say his own words expect to speak on television? The class laughed. Imagine the moment not as a confirmed transcript of every word, but as the kind of memory that can
7 years. I love you. Thank you so much.
remain sharp for decades. A young boy stands near his desk while other children stare. He tries to defend a future no one else can see. Each attempt to speak makes the stutter worse. The more difficult the words become, the more impossible the dream appears. The teacher believes she is giving practical advice. The boy hears a sentence that will follow him for the rest of his life. You cannot do that. Steve later said his father encouraged him to keep that written dream and look at it regularly. Whether the world believed him or not, the idea had already taken root. But believing in a dream is easy when you are a child. The real test begins when adulthood sends you the bill. Before comedy, Steve moved through a long list of jobs. He sold insurance. He cleaned carpets. He delivered mail. He worked in factories and tried boxing. He attended college but did not graduate.
Okay, it's the show's third season, been on 2 years. I've known...
His 20s did not look like the beginning of a legendary entertainment career. They looked uncertain. He was a husband and a father carrying responsibilities while still trying to understand what he was meant to do. The childhood dream of television remained somewhere inside him. But dreams become quieter when rent is due, children need support, and every practical person around you asks when you are finally going to settle down. Then came comedy. In the mid-1980s, Steve performed at an amateur comedy night in Cleveland. The exact details have been retold in different forms over the years, but the result was unmistakable. He made people laugh, and the experience changed something inside him. For a few minutes, the stutter did not define him. The uncertainty disappeared. He stood on stage, controlled the rhythm of the room, and felt the audience respond to his timing, his observations, his expressions, and the
How the hell you think you gonna win it with naked grandma? What's the chance?
voice that a teacher had once considered unsuitable for television. When he finished, he reportedly won prize money, but what mattered more was the discovery. He had found the place where his pain could become power. That first successful performance did not magically create a career. It created a temptation, the possibility that comedy might be more than a hobby. And pursuing that possibility came at an enormous cost. Steve began traveling for performances, taking small bookings wherever he could find them. Comedy clubs did not always pay enough to cover food, fuel, and accommodation. His marriage deteriorated. Financial pressure grew. He still had obligations to his children, but the income was inconsistent and the future uncertain. Eventually, Steve found himself living inside his Ford Tempo. For approximately 3 years,
This summer, we became grandparents.
Yeah.
that vehicle became his home. It is easy to turn homelessness into a dramatic montage when telling a success story. A few rainy nights. A sad song. Then a sudden breakthrough. Real homelessness does not move that quickly. It is repetitive. It is waking up with pain in your neck because the seat does not lie flat. It is hiding your circumstances from people who might look at you differently. It is calculating whether tonight's money should buy food or enough fuel to reach tomorrow's show. It is searching for somewhere to wash before walking into a club and presenting yourself like a professional. It is performing for strangers who assume the comedian entertaining them has somewhere to go afterward. Picture an imagined night based on the reality Steve has described. The show ends after midnight. He has done well, not brilliantly, but well enough to be invited back someday. The manager hands him a small payment. Steve smiles,
Everybody sit down.
I really don't know how to cut this.
thanks him, and leaves with the dignity of a working entertainer. Outside, the temperature has dropped. He sits behind the steering wheel and counts the cash. One portion must go toward fuel, another toward food. He considers a motel, but even the cheapest room would take too much. He drives until the club is far behind him, finds a place where the car will not attract attention, and turns off the engine. The silence arrives immediately. On stage, laughter protected him. Inside the car, there is nothing to distract him from the questions. What if the teacher was right? What if his family needs a man with a regular paycheck more than the world needs another comedian? What if he has confused faith with stubbornness? That last question is one nearly every dreamer eventually faces. Persistence looks noble after success. Before success, it can look irresponsible. There were people who understandably believed Steve
You bailed me, man. I never forgot it.
should stop. He was no longer a child imagining television. He was an adult with children, a broken marriage, unstable income, and no permanent home. Going back to a normal job would not have been cowardice. It would have been reasonable. But reasonable had become dangerous to him. Reasonable was the word people used when they could not see what he saw. At one especially desperate point, Steve has said he reached an emotional breaking point. He had little money, nowhere stable to live, and no obvious evidence that the sacrifice would ever pay off. He reportedly prayed and questioned why his life had become so difficult while he was trying to use the talent he believed God had given him. Then a message arrived offering him an opportunity at the Apollo Theater in New York. But even opportunity can feel cruel when you cannot afford to reach it. Steve did not have enough money for the trip. The door he had prayed for
Country dude, a naked grandma.
appeared, and he lacked the resources to walk through it. Then another comedy booking reportedly came in, providing enough money for him to travel. Think about how narrow that turning point was. Not a movie contract, not $1 million check, a phone call, a booking, and just enough money to reach the next stage. Had that opportunity arrived a little later, he might have quit. Had the payment been slightly smaller, he might not have made the trip. Had he allowed shame to silence him, the world might never have seen what came next. At the Apollo, Steve entered one of the toughest rooms in entertainment. The audience at Harlem's legendary theater was famous for judging performers quickly and mercilessly. If they disliked you, they did not politely wait for your act to finish. They let you know. For a man who had already been laughed at in a classroom, rejected by circumstances, and humbled by years in a car, the Apollo represented
your father is making his absolutely...
Another public verdict, but this time the laughter was on his side. Steve's personality filled the room. His style felt lived in rather than manufactured. He did not speak like someone who had studied hardship from a distance. He spoke like a man who had slept beside his clothes, driven through the night, and still walked on stage ready to entertain. The pain had given his comedy weight. He continued climbing. In the early 1990s, he gained national attention and eventually became a host of Showtime at the Apollo. Consider the reversal. The boy mocked for saying he wanted to appear on television was now standing on television inside one of America's most famous theaters. But success did not erase insecurity. It simply changed its clothing. When a person has spent years surviving, stability can feel temporary even after it arrives. Every new opportunity carries a hidden fear. What happens when this ends? Steve's next major chapter came with The Steve Harvey Show, which premiered in 1996.
My opponent is the audience. My job is to beat him up as bad as I can.
The sitcom gave him a defining television role and helped establish him as one of the most recognizable black comedians of the era. Alongside Cedric the Entertainer and a talented ensemble cast, Steve built a character audiences welcomed into their homes for 6 seasons. He had reached the dream. His face was on television. The teacher had been proven wrong. But life rarely allows a victory to remain uncomplicated. A successful show eventually ends. When The Steve Harvey Show concluded in 2002, Steve faced a question that has quietly destroyed many entertainers. Was the audience in love with him, or only with the character he had played? Hollywood is filled with people who become famous once and spend the rest of their lives trying to recreate that moment. Steve needed a second act. Instead of relying on one format, he began building several. Radio became one of his strongest platforms.
Everything I know about survival.
The Steve Harvey Morning Show allowed him to combine comedy, conversation, advice, faith, and cultural commentary. Listeners did not simply hear a performer. They heard a man speaking directly to people who were trying to make sense of relationships, work, failure, and ambition. Then came publishing. In 2009, Steve released Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. The book became a major bestseller and later inspired successful films. Some praised his direct relationship advice. Others criticized it as oversimplified, traditional, or controversial. But whether people agreed with him or argued with him, they paid attention. That became one of the defining features of Steve Harvey's career. He was rarely invisible. In 2010, he took over as host of Family
I got a lot more that you're going to enjoy, so just click to watch the next one.
Feud. At first glance, the job might have seemed like another hosting assignment. Family Feud was an established game show that had already existed for decades under several presenters. But Steve transformed the role into something uniquely his own. He did not merely read survey answers. He reacted to them. A raised eyebrow, a long pause, a glance toward the audience, or one perfectly timed question could turn an ordinary answer into a viral moment. His greatest skill was not telling jokes. It was making people feel as though the joke had happened naturally between them. The clips spread across the internet. Younger viewers who had never watched his sitcom discovered him through shocked reactions and unpredictable contestants. Family Feud found renewed cultural relevance, and Steve became one of the most visible hosts on television. The man who once slept inside a car was now appearing across television, radio, books, live events, and films. It looked like the story had reached its triumphant ending. Then came one card. December 20th, 2015, Steve Harvey stood on stage as host of the Miss Universe pageant. The final contestants waited beneath the lights. The audience watched from around the world. This was live television, where every pause feels longer and every mistake becomes permanent. Steve announced Miss Colombia, Ariadna Gutierrez, as the winner. The crown was placed on her head. She waved. Confetti fell. Cameras captured the emotional celebration. Then, Steve returned to the stage. His expression had changed. He announced that he had made a mistake. Miss Colombia was the first runner-up. Miss Philippines, Pia Wurtzbach, was Miss Universe. For several painful minutes, the entire world seemed frozen between celebration and disbelief. The crown had to be removed from one woman and placed on another. Steve held up the card and accepted responsibility. But the correction could not undo the scene millions had already witnessed. The internet exploded. Memes appeared immediately. Late-night shows mocked him. News outlets replayed the footage. Social media users attacked his competence, his intelligence, and his career. Some people treated the mistake as comedy. Others treated it as evidence that he had never deserved the job. For Steve, it was not merely an embarrassing moment. It was a nightmare built from the deepest fear of his childhood. He had finally reached the biggest stages in the world, only to make a mistake so public that people everywhere laughed at him again. Imagine an emotional reconstruction of the hours after the broadcast. The stage is empty now. The confetti has been swept away. The contestants have gone. The bright lights are off. Steve sits alone, staring at the card that changed the entire night. His phone vibrates endlessly. Messages, headlines, jokes, anger. For decades, he has taught audiences to laugh at uncomfortable moments. Now the uncomfortable moment is him. No performance can hide it. No editor can remove it. He may have wondered whether this mistake would become the first line of every future story about him. The homeless years had tested whether he could survive private pain. Miss Universe tested whether he could survive public humiliation. There is a difference. Private failure allows you to disappear. Public failure follows you into every room. Steve apologized and accepted the blame. He explained that he had misread the card. He did not pretend the error had not happened. He faced interviews, questions, criticism, and continued jokes. Most importantly, he returned. He hosted Miss Universe again. That decision mattered because courage is not always a grand speech. Sometimes courage is walking back onto the same stage where the world watched you fail. He could not control whether people mentioned the mistake. He could control whether the mistake ended his career. It did not. Steve continued hosting Family Feud and its celebrity editions. He maintained his radio presence, pursued international versions of his programs, delivered motivational talks, supported educational and mentoring initiatives through his foundation, and expanded his business interests. Yet his life has never been free from controversy. His relationship advice has faced criticism. Comments he has made over the years have generated backlash. His personal life, including multiple marriages and family tensions reported in the media, has been discussed publicly. His talk shows experienced changes and cancellation. Like many highly visible figures, he has been praised as inspirational by some and criticized as outdated, arrogant, or overly certain by others. A meaningful story does not require pretending the central figure is perfect. Steve Harvey is compelling precisely because he is not. He has made mistakes. He has offended people. He has delivered advice that not everyone accepts. He has also repeatedly shown an unusual ability to rebuild after disappointment. That ability may come from the years when rebuilding was not a motivational concept. It was a daily requirement. When you have awakened in a car unsure where your next meal will come from, a canceled show hurts, but it does not feel like the end of existence. When you have performed while carrying the shame of homelessness, online ridicule becomes painful but survivable. When a teacher has already told you your voice does not belong on television, every year you remain there becomes an answer. At 69, Steve Harvey's greatest achievement may not be any single program. It may be the number of times his career could have ended, but did not. The young man in the car could have quit. The comedian struggling for bookings could have quit. The sitcom actor facing the end of his signature show could have quit. The host standing beneath the Miss Universe lights could have disappeared from public life. Instead, each version of Steve Harvey handed the story to the next. The child held on to the dream. The worker carried it through ordinary jobs. The homeless comedian protected it inside a car. The television star expanded it. The humiliated host refused to surrender it. And the older man turned it into a message he now repeats to audiences around the world. Your current circumstances do not have the authority to decide your final destination. There is an image that brings his entire journey together. A suit hanging inside a car. The fabric must remain clean because appearance matters. The man wearing it may have slept badly. He may be hungry. He may have cried hours earlier. But when he walks into the club, the audience cannot be asked to carry his pain. He has to make them laugh. Years later, Steve would own more suits than the man in that car could have imagined. Bright suits, expensive suits, television suits, red carpet suits. But the most important one may always be the suit that hung beside him when he had nowhere else to live. It represented preparation without proof. He did not know which performance would change his life. He dressed as though one of them might. That is the hidden lesson beneath the fame. Success did not begin when Steve Harvey received a television contract. It began when he continued preparing before there was any evidence preparation would be rewarded. It began when he protected tomorrow's suit during tonight's struggle. Maybe that is why his story continues to connect with people who are nowhere near a television studio. Most dreams do not die because the dreamer lacks talent. They die during the invisible years. The years when no one applauds. The years when the money is low. The years when family members stop asking how the dream is going because the answer has become uncomfortable. The years when be realistic sounds less like an insult and more like relief. Steve Harvey's life does not prove that every risk will succeed. It does not mean everyone should abandon responsibility, ignore practical advice, or assume hardship guarantees a reward. Hardship promises nothing. But his story does prove that present conditions can lie about future possibilities. A stutter did not prevent him from becoming a broadcaster. Homelessness did not prevent him from building wealth. A canceled show did not prevent another chapter. A globally televised mistake did not erase decades of work. And one teacher's limited imagination did not have to become the limit of a child's life. The next time you see Steve Harvey pause before reacting to a ridiculous Family Feud answer, remember that the silence behind his expression contains more than comic timing. It contains a classroom, a series of ordinary jobs, a broken marriage, a parked car, cold nights, unanswered prayers, an Apollo stage, a television sitcom, a best-selling book, a crown placed on the wrong head, and a man walking back into public view after millions had laughed at his mistake. That is why his laughter sounds so large. It had to become louder than everything that once told him to stop. And perhaps the most important question in Steve Harvey's story is not how a homeless comedian became famous. It is this: what are you preparing for while no one believes it is coming? Somewhere tonight, another person may be sitting inside a car, a small apartment, an empty workplace, or a dark bedroom, wondering whether the difficult years mean the dream was foolish. Steve Harvey's journey cannot promise that person fame. But it offers one powerful reminder. The chapter that looks like the ending may only be the place where the real story learns how to survive. The boy who was told he could never appear on television did not merely appear on it. He built a life around the voice he was once made to feel ashamed of. And the man who once had no address eventually became welcome in millions of homes. Tell us in the comments which chapter of Steve Harvey's journey affected you most: the childhood rejection, the years of homelessness, or the way he returned after the Miss Universe mistake. And subscribe, because the most famous smiles often hide the stories nobody saw.